This session covers scope of variables. So as you know, in any programming language, if you want to use a variable in our program, it should be defined, right? Yeah, in Python, we used to define a variable by assigning some values and all, right? So these variables can only be accessed in the area where they are defined. Okay, so if you want to access the value or if you want to use that variable in our program, only inside the area in which it is defined, we can access. And that area is called scope of that variable. So if we try to use this variable out of this area, some error will be generated, name error will be generated. So that is the scope of variable. Now let us see what are the different types of scopes available in Python. Mainly we can divide the scope of variables in Python as local scope and global scope. Let us see one by one. First one is local scope. So in local scope, if the variable is in local scope, that means that variable can only be accessed within its block where it is actually defined. Within the block only we can access the corresponding variable. Let us see an example for that. So here we have a variable x equal to 10, okay, and we are defining a function. Within that function we have two different statements. First one is for printing, just local scope, and we are assigning a value 20 to another variable y. So this y is actually local to this function and x is global for the entire program. Okay, now we are calling this function. So when we call this function, the corresponding function definition will be invoked. This print statement will be executed first. Then the value 20 will be assigned to y. After that, we are trying to print x, then print y. Print x. X is actually a global value, right? Because it is the scope of this variable x is throughout the program. Okay, so its value will be printed. What about y? Its scope is only within this function, right? It's local scope. So if we try to access this variable out of that scope, it will generate an error. So let us analyze the output of this function. First is local scope, because we are calling the function here. So the first statement, print local scope. Local scope will be displayed. After that, next is print x, right? Yeah, x, value of x will be printed, that is 10. Then we are printing y. What's y actually? It is unknown for the entire program, right? It is within the function only. It is local only, right? So an error will be generated for that. What's the error? Name error. Name y is not defined. It is not known to the program outside this function. So that is local scope. So like that we have global scope. So the variables that are declared in the global scope can be accessed from anywhere in the program. We have already seen that x is actually global variable, right? Because it can be accessed throughout the program. Global variables can be used inside any functions. We can also change the global variable value. You will see an example for global scope. Here we are assigning a text string global to a variable var. Okay. So this is outside the function, or this is for the entire program. Okay, now we are defining another function log, and within that log we are trying to print this variable. Actually this var is outside this function, but it is accessible to this function. So if we call this function log, what happens? Yeah, this print statement will be executed and the value of that var, that is global, will be displayed. That means the global variable can be accessed within any functions for that entire program. Okay. Another example, here also we are using the same variable name var and assigning the value global, and we are defining local function, and here we are changing the value. Var is equal to local and trying to print var. Okay. And we are calling this function log and again trying to print the value of var. Let us see what's the output of this. So first we are calling this function log, right? Yeah, when we call this function log, this body will be executed. So this variable var will be assigned the value local, and we are trying to print that. So definitely local will be printed, right? Yeah, local we got. Next is we are printing the variable var outside the scope of that function, right? Yeah. Can you guess what can be the output or the display or message for this print? Actually, if we refer the same variable name within this local function, here we are assigning a new value means we are redefining it. We are actually creating another local variable with the same name. So if we refer var within this local function, by assigning a new value, it act as a new variable, local variable. That is why we are getting the value local here, but outside the scope of that function, the global value remains. It won't be changed. It's another variable. Okay, that's why we are getting global. Now, if you want to change the value of a global variable within a local function, and that change should be shown or it should be reflected throughout the program, what can be done? For that, we have a global keyword. Okay, you can see here we have the loc function. Within that, we are using a variable and assigning a value local, and we are trying to print the value here. Then we are calling this loc. Again, we are trying to print the variable var outside the scope of the function. What can be the output in this case? Yeah, when we call this loc, this will be executed, then print will be executed, the local will be printed, right? And what about this print statement? This var is not known outside the scope of this function, right? Yeah, definitely error will be generated. So this is the output. For the first loc call, this print will be executed and local will be printed. And when we try to print the variable var outside this function, error will be generated, name error, name var is not defined. Okay. So if you want to make a variable within this local function global, you can see here the definition, that is using a keyword global var. We are saying that the variable used var in this function is to be made global. Then we are assigning a value global here and printing it, and calling this function log, again trying to print it. What can be the output? Definitely for calling this log, print will be executed, global will be printed, right? Again we are trying to print it here. Now it is global variable. The scope is made wide to the global or throughout the program, right? Now it will be printed global again. This is a global keyword. One more example, let us see. Var is equal to 100. It's a global scope variable. Again another function log with the same variable name. It is assigned 200. If we try to print the variable here, the value will be 200, right? So we are calling log. This will be executed, print will be executed, 200 will be printed. Now if you try to print the variable again outside the function, the value will be 100 alone, right? Yeah, that's a global value is 100 actually. Even if you are trying to change, it actually act as a new variable for this log function. It's a local variable for this log function. Okay, so the output is 200 for the function called log, and for the outside the function or the global variable, it will be 100. Okay, now we want to change the value of this var within this function, and that change should be reflected throughout the program. For that we can use the global keyword. Okay, so we are assigning a variable with value 100. Within this log function, we are saying that I am going to modify the global variable var, not a local variable. So, so by giving the keyword global var, if you're trying to assign a value 200, that is actually the global var, not the local variable. Okay. So if you print it, 200 will be printed. Again, we are calling it. So this print statement, 200 will be the output. Again, we are printing outside the local function. The var actually got changed. Okay, because here the var, global var is modified. So again, 200 will be displayed. That is a use of global keyword. Now let us see the difference between global and local scope using another program. I took this code from Geeks for Geeks website. In this program, what they are doing is actually initializing a variable a with the value 1. So this is a global variable. It can be accessed by any function within the scope of the entire program. And it's defining a new function f. Within that function, we are trying to print the value of a what's the value of a within this function. That is the purpose of this function. Another function g, assigning a new value to a and trying to print its value here. And the third function is declaring a as global, then assigning a value, then printing it. So these are the three different functions. Let us see what are the different changes occur for a by invoking these different functions. So first print statement in the main thread is print global value of a, the initial global value of a. So definitely the initial global value is 1, that will be displayed. Then we are calling function f. So going to this function f, this will be executed. Print of inside f, what's the value of a. So you can see here inside f, value of a will be 1 itself, because there is no redefinition for a, no change for a. So the global value will be displayed here. So f is over. Again print global a. We are trying to print the global value of a. A is not yet changed, so global value 1 will be displayed. Then we are calling function g. What happens to g? Within g, the first statement is a equal to 2. Redefining a, right? But we are not saying that it is global and all. So it's a local variable. A is acting as a local variable here. And trying to print inside g the value of a. So a will be 2 here. This will be the statement printed inside g 2. Again coming back here, print global a. Again we are trying to print the value of global a. Global a is not yet changed, so definitely global 1 will be displayed. Then we are calling h, the last statement. H is called. What happens? Saying that I am going to modify the global a, keyword global, then a equal to 3. So actually the global value of a is modified. Then trying to print it, what happens? Print inside h, 3 will be displayed. Coming back, the last printf statement in the main thread, print global a. Now the a value of a is actually changed, global value is also changed, so 3 will be displayed. So this is how the global and local scope works. Another type of scope is using a non-local keyword. It's actually significant in case of nested functions and all. Usually the variable is accessible, or the scope of a variable is within the block in which it is defined, right? So if you want to extend the scope to the outside function, in the case of nested function, so if you are defining a variable within the inner function, usually that the scope will be only within the inner function, right? So if you want to extend the scope to the outside function, outer function also, we can use the non-local keyword. We will see an example for that. In this program, first statement is print. Okay, just we are printing a message. Value of a using non-local is. Then after that, the end is equal to a blank or empty means the cursor will remain here itself for displaying something else. So next value to be, or next whatever we are trying to print, that will come just after this message. Okay, not in the new line. That is why we are using the end is equal to empty words. Okay, so that is the first statement. After that we are defining a function, define outer function we are defining. Within that we are using a variable a equal to 5, and within that outer function we are defining a new function, define inner function, and we are saying that non-local a. That means a is actually the inner function refer the variable which is outside this function, that is a, this a. Okay, and assigning a is equal to 10. And within the outer function itself we are calling inner. What happens when the inner is called? This will be executed. Non-local a equal to 10. So the value of a got modified. If you try to print the value of a, definitely the value will be 10, because inner saying that I am trying to change the non-local a, not my parents a. Okay, so that is why we are getting such an output. Value of a using non-local is, that is actually we printed. Next print statement, the value 10 will be printed here itself. So that is non-local keyword. Another example for this. here print a value of a without using non-local. So if we are not using non-local, what happens? So here also the message will be displayed and cursor will remain here itself, and we are trying to define the outer function with the variable a equal to 5, and within that outer function we have the inner function definition, and we are changing the value into 10 but not giving the keyword non-local. So what happens? It's actually redefining a, that means another variable with name a which is local to inner function. Okay, this is a new variable actually. So if you are calling inner within the outer function, the definition of inner will be executed, a equal to 10 will be executed. Print a means we are trying to print the corresponding value of a outside the scope of this inner function, right? So this a is actually this a, it refers to this a, the value will be 5. So that is how this non-local keyword works. It's actually this output comes in one line, okay, because of space limitation it comes in the next line. So this is how the non-local scope works. So this is all about scope of variables. Thank you.